The confession began quietly, almost like a casual chess lesson. But as Garry Kasparov continued speaking in that dimly lit Zagreb mansion, Magnus Carlsen and Anish Giri realized they weren't listening to a victim revealing decades of manipulation. They were staring into the eyes of the true architect of the entire chess conspiracy. Because the Zagreb Master had never been the real leader. For 30 years, Kasparov had been pulling every string, controlling every move, and now he was ready to recruit them into his most ambitious project yet. You see, what Magnus and Anish discovered that night would force them to question everything they thought they knew about chess history, competitive integrity, and the man they had considered the greatest player of all time. The next generation protocol wasn't just about continuing the conspiracy. It was about expanding it to every young chess prodigy on the planet. "I suppose it's time you understood the truth," Kasparov said, his voice carrying a confidence that Magnus had never heard before. The vulnerable, desperate man they thought they were rescuing had vanished, replaced by someone who radiated control and calculated intelligence. Magnus felt his world shifting as he studied Kasparov's expression. "What truth?" "That everything you've discovered about the Chess Council, the Zagreb Master, even the Russian Chess Legacy Project, was designed by me to test whether you were worthy of joining the real operation," Kasparov replied, standing up from the chessboard with surprising energy. Anish backed toward the door, his instincts telling him they were in immediate danger. "You're saying this was all a setup?" "Not a setup," Kasparov corrected, walking to one of the monitors and activating a comprehensive display. "A recruitment process. For 30 years, I've been building the most sophisticated network of intellectual manipulation in human history. The Chess Council was just one small component." The monitors around the room lit up with information that made Magnus's blood run cold. Real-time data streams from chess tournaments worldwide, but also from poker competitions, esports events, academic institutions, and even political campaigns. The scope was staggering. "The Zagreb Master?" Magnus asked, his voice barely audible. "A useful front," Kasparov replied matter-of-factly. "Someone to serve as the apparent leader while I remained hidden. But his usefulness has ended, which is why you found him so easily tonight." Magnus realized they had been manipulated from the very beginning. Every clue they had followed, every revelation they had uncovered, had been carefully placed to lead them to this moment. "Why?" Anish demanded. "Why create this elaborate deception?" Kasparov pulled up files that showed detailed psychological profiles of both Magnus and Anish. "Because I needed to understand your capabilities, your motivations, your willingness to fight for what you believe is right. The next phase of my operations requires individuals with your specific talents." The profiles were comprehensive, documenting years of their activities, relationships, strategic thinking patterns, and moral frameworks. Kasparov had been studying them with the thoroughness of a scientist examining laboratory specimens. "The next-generation protocol," Kasparov continued, "involves recruiting and training the world's most promising young chess players to become agents of influence in their respective countries. Not just chess influence, political, economic, and social influence." Magnus studied the documentation, seeing names of young prodigies from around the world, players he had mentored, competed against, and considered the future of chess, all being targeted for recruitment into Kasparov's network. "You're talking about using children," Magnus said, disgust evident in his voice. "I'm talking about shaping the leaders of tomorrow," Kasparov corrected. "These young players possess exceptional intellectual capabilities. With proper guidance, they can become influential figures in business, politics, academia, and technology." The plan was more sophisticated than anything Magnus had imagined. Kasparov wasn't just manipulating chess tournaments, he was creating a generation of intellectually gifted individuals who would be strategically placed throughout society. "How long have you been doing this?" Anish asked. "The preliminary phase," "Began 15 years ago," Kasparov replied, showing them records of young players who had been through his programs. "We now have former chess prodigies serving as advisors to government officials, technology executives, and financial institutions across 6 continents." Magnus recognized some of the names on Kasparov's list. Young players who had shown promise, but eventually left competitive chess for successful careers in other fields. He had always assumed they had simply found chess financially unsustainable. "They were all recruited through the same process you've been experiencing," Kasparov explained, "presented with evidence of corruption, given the opportunity to fight for justice, then gradually introduced to the larger vision of intellectual optimization. The recruitment process was psychological warfare disguised as moral crusade. Young players were made to feel like heroes saving chess when they were actually being indoctrinated into a network of influence and control." "What makes you think we would join you?" Magnus asked. Kasparov smiled with genuine warmth, which somehow made him more terrifying. "Because you've already demonstrated the qualities I need: intelligence, integrity, willingness to risk everything for your principles. These are exactly the characteristics that make someone valuable to my operations." He showed them comprehensive plans for expanding the network into artificial intelligence development, cryptocurrency markets, and emerging technology sectors. The young chess prodigies were being positioned to influence the development of technologies that would shape human civilization. "The beautiful part," Kasparov continued, "is that most of them don't realize they're part of a coordinated network. They believe they're making independent decisions based on their own analysis and moral frameworks." Magnus understood the horrifying elegance of the system. By recruiting individuals with strong ethical foundations and exceptional analytical abilities, Kasparov had created a network that operated through genuine conviction rather than coercion. "But some do know," Anish observed, studying the documentation more carefully. "Of course," Kasparov confirmed. "The most advanced participants understand the full scope of our operations and actively contribute to strategic planning. They've recognized that coordinated intellectual influence is necessary for optimizing human decision-making on a global scale." The rationalization was sophisticated, presenting the conspiracy as a benevolent effort to improve human civilization through strategic guidance by intellectually superior individuals. "What happens to those who refuse to participate?" Magnus asked. Kasparov's expression became more serious. "Nothing dramatic. Their careers simply fail to reach their full potential. Opportunities don't materialize. Sponsors become unavailable. They fade into obscurity without ever understanding why." The elimination method was subtle but effective. Rather than destroying opponents directly, Kasparov's network simply ensured that non-participants couldn't compete with those who had access to coordinated support and resources. "And if we refuse your offer?" Anish asked. "Then you return to your normal lives," Kasparov replied. "But you'll find that the chess world has changed. Tournament invitations will become scarce. Sponsorship opportunities will disappear. Media attention will focus on other players." Magnus realized they were facing a choice between joining the conspiracy or accepting professional irrelevance. Kasparov had constructed a system where neutrality was effectively impossible. "There's something else you need to consider," Kasparov continued, activating another monitor display. "The network I've built represents the future of competitive intellectual activities. Within 10 years, every major chess tournament, poker championship, and esports event will be influenced by our participants." The prediction wasn't a threat. It was a statement of inevitable reality. Kasparov had created a system that would naturally expand until it controlled all forms of intellectual competition. "You can either be part of shaping that future," Kasparov concluded, "or you can be marginalized by it." Magnus looked at Anish, understanding that they were facing the most important decision of their lives. Join a conspiracy that promised them unprecedented influence and success, or maintain their integrity while watching their careers slowly destroyed. "We need time to consider this," Magnus said. "Of course," Kasparov replied graciously, "but understand that this offer won't remain available indefinitely. The next generation protocol launches in 6 months, and I need to finalize my core team before then." As they prepared to leave the mansion, Kasparov delivered one final revelation that made Magnus's blood run cold. "Magnus, you should know that your world championship victories weren't entirely your own achievement. I've been subtly guiding your development since you were a teenager, ensuring you would reach exactly this point at exactly this time." The admission shattered Magnus's understanding of his own career. How much of his success had been authentic, and how much had been orchestrated by Kasparov's long-term planning. "Think carefully about what you've learned tonight," Kasparov said as they reached the door. "You have the opportunity to become architects of human intellectual evolution. But if you choose to oppose me, remember that I've been playing this game much longer than either of you have been alive." As Magnus and Anish left the Zagreb mansion, they understood that their investigation had led them not to salvation, but to the heart of a conspiracy more sophisticated and dangerous than they had ever imagined. The real war for Chess's soul was just beginning, and they would have to choose which side they wanted to fight for.